They, quote unquote, say you should never do these things in mastering. And honestly, when I was starting out, I believed it too, and to my own detriment, because over the past decade, I've mastered more than 6,000 projects, including 2 Grammy-nominated albums, and projects that have charted on the Billboard charts and the ARIA charts, and putting in those repetitions, working on project after project after project, has taught me that the real mistake isn't breaking rules, it's not understanding why the rules exist and how to bend them without losing the artist's vision and respecting the mixing engineer and the producer. So in this video, I'm going to share 3 mastering rules I've broken, and more importantly, when breaking them has actually led to better results, happier clients, and more sign-offs. Now, before we dive in, if you want to sharpen your mastering instincts even further, grab my free 5-day mastering sprint down below. It's packed with great hands-on insight and lessons delivered straight to your email for 5 days with real-world techniques to take your mastering to the next level. Now, let's dive in. The first rule is do not accept limited mixes, and you should break this because here's a mix by Young Dre and NLE Chopper on their track Don't Understand. This was mixed by Bob Horn. It was the first track he sent me to master for him, and this track comes in at a modest 8.7 LUFS. That is what the mix is at. Now, why I broke this rule. Here's the reason why. Bob's mix was signed off. The clients loved it, Bob loved it, the producer loved it, the label was good to go, so guess what? We were bringing this to town. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to play you the before and the after, so the mix he sent me and the master afterwards, and then we're going to look at some little tactics we can do to maintain the integrity of the mix without compromising the master.
The muscle. Don't tell my language, they don't understand. Don't know my pain, so you don't understand. I'm paranoid and they don't understand. I tell my shit, so they don't understand. Don't tell my language, they don't understand. Don't know my pain, so you don't understand. I'm paranoid and they don't understand. I tell my shit, so they don't understand.
You can hear in essence it's the same mix, but the master embellishes quite a bit there. I remember when I was doing this one, I was running it through the Dangerous AD Plus comp. I was adding a bit of saturation. It was hitting the Manly Varimu. So I was using the whole analog chain and just really enriching what was there. But here's what I do every time I start a master from a really loud mix. So the very first thing is Bob already does this when he sends the final mix for mastering, but not every mixing engineer does this. The first thing, I'll bring the clip in and then I just gain it down. Now, there's 2 ways to gain that down. Either you can gain it in the clip, and this is a rudimentary practice, so your gain staging is set up. So if you just want to go straight out to analog, it's already brought down. If you're going into any emulation plugins or whatnot, or anything with a 24-bit architecture, you're not going to go over 0. It's just good practice. So either you do that on the clip, or what I've recently started doing in Pro Tools is I've been using the trim plugin because, so I'll just go here, -6 on the first insert there. Something I found, and this was human error I was doing, is that I would gain down the mix, I'd master it, and then I'd get an update of a mix from the mixing engineer or the producer, and then I'd drag it back in, and I would forget to gain it back down on the clip, and then it would obviously, I'd be thinking like, what the hell's going on? Why is this blasting so loud? And then I realized, oh, wait a second, I haven't turned the clip gain down. So instead of doing the clip gain, which I used to do in older sessions, I actually use the trim function as a plugin because that's just really easy to always have on there and turn on and off if I need to. That's step number 1. Step number 2, and this is really good for considering the loudest part of the song, and I do this in most masters regardless, but if you go into Isotope Audio Editor, and you click on the waveform statistics, this little marker there for the max short-term loudness, 7.1 LUFS. It's going to give you a time marker, and that time marker for this song is 2 minutes and 7 seconds. And typically what I do these days, I didn't do it on this session. This is a bit of an old session. It's like 3 years old. Where's 2:07? There it is. So I'll take those 3 seconds, clip it, and that will just stay as a cut clip on my wave region. And whenever I have to reference the loudness of the original mix, I know that was the loudest part, and I can just click there and put it on loop. When it comes to manipulating it or processing it, focus on tonal changes and EQ. And something with this one, which I think is very unique, I wish I had this technology back when I mastered it, is the ability to use focus modes in processors. So in this, the kick drum I feel could have just been a little bit more punchy and pulling out of the mix a bit more. So what we're going to do is we're going to go over to audio editor. We are going to zoom straight in. We want to know exactly where the transient of that kick is. So if we zoom in here, okay, just going to zoom straight in. We're going to zoom back out. We're going to zoom straight in. So the transient of that kick just falls in there. The sustain is below it. Not too concerned with the sustain, but between 55 hertz and 120 hertz, we're getting transient and knocking of the kick. I'm going to go a little bit higher than 55 hertz because I know that's hitting an A at 55. So what we're going to do is we're going to go in ozone 11, go into drum mode. We're going to add 2 little markers, and this is just my little mini lazy hack for getting the exact frequency I want. So 60 to 120. We're going to lift this up. I'm going to bring the Q in to about 4, 3, bring this up a considerable amount and put this in transient sustain. Might go a bit wider on the Q. Okay, listen to the delta, and we should only be pulling the kick from this mix now, which would be good. Let's have a listen. Beautiful. So we're only getting the kick, we're only embellishing and giving a boost to the kick drum. And now let's have a listen to this before and after.
We got turkey bags of them veggies, like Razzie Ridges, like KFC with rich off of chicken. When the birds fly from the birds, how we see shit different. Hey, we look up the Pablo Chapo, can't forget Frank Nitty. I wish a nigga play and help, we chop them with these switches.
Beautiful. And it's just processes like that where we're aiming to keep the mix cohesive and honest to the original intent of the mixing engineer, the producer, the artist, and embellish what's there. That's pretty invasive, but if it's needed, we can do that with this sort of processing and it not kill the overall vibe of the mix. The next sort of quote unquote rule is snobby mastering engineers saying that stem mastering isn't mastering. And when I was starting out, I really bought into this in a bad way because I got reamed in forums and online for sort of saying this as well. And I break this rule. The mastering goals that a client has doesn't align with the mix potential. So the payoff will never be there if you're working from a stereo track and you need access to a little bit more just to bend it into the direction the client is after. So here are my guiding rules to when I'm working with stems for a client. Make sure the client is happy with where they've taken the mix. Okay, it's not an opportunity to remix the song. It's an opportunity to address things that they otherwise can't or that are going to help them achieve their goal in mastering. And the second thing, and this is super important, I'm going to drill this in, and if you've watched to this part of the video, it's critical, is that before clients send stems, put them into a new project and play them against the production mix. Make sure everything balances and lines up as per the original mix. If anything is turned off, if any levels are out and it doesn't represent the original mix, you're in trouble. So that's the first thing. You need to make sure client's happy and that everything is exported correctly for stem mastering. Otherwise, everybody's going to get frustrated with the process because it's not keeping that original intent of the mix. The next one is to use linear phase EQ, and I'm going to show you something really interesting here. I've got this subline here and this high synth line here. And you might not think much of these two lines, that they have much information that's sharing. However, you should use linear phase EQ when you're stem mastering because it will change the way the layers sum together. So if something is shifted out of phase, they're not going to sum back and have that original tone of the original mix. And I'm going to show you this because even though these two layers are in completely different regions, one's in the sub, one's in the mid-range, their phase coherency on whatever frequencies are crossing over do change the tone. What I want you to hear is the high synths when I turn the phase around of the sub, the high synths start to get really dull. number one. Okay, so when it comes to phase, I left a note here, phase coherent EQ on layers, so this way I wouldn't miss this note for you, because it's really important. Now, that's a very benign version between the sub and the synths, but it does affect the tone of it. So imagine how it affects the tone on kick drums to 808s, to vocal stacks between BVs and lead vocal. It changes the way it sounds. So if you want to keep the mix integrated to its original tone, use linear phase in stem mastering. That's at least the rule I'm following at the moment. That's really important. The next thing is if you're adding any saturation or tone to it. I didn't do that in this stem master because this is sort of me exploring and learning the ropes of breaking this rule. But something I do now is to level match the output of any of my saturation or tone plugins. I did do this on one instance with the knock plugin. I didn't do it. Like, I ended up chasing my tail a little bit on this master with it. But for the vocals, I've got Neutron 4 here, and it adds about a decibel of level to the overall vocal. So what I did is I brought the vocal down 1 decibel on the output. Final rule to break is to make shit loud. People saying you need to keep the dynamics and whatnot, but here's the reality. Some records definitely deserve more dynamics. Some records need to be loud. And if you're not going to be the one who makes them loud, then who? It's just a thing, and your duty of care is to your clients, to the mixing engineer, to the producer, to push the boundaries, not just rest on a stupid rule that's like, we don't make it loud because it sounds worse. Why does it sound worse? Because you don't know how to make it loud. I got a bit worked up there, but basically, we can't be elitists in this world with music, and if we're trying to push ourselves as professionals, we have to know the ways to make something loud. And what I've got in front of me is, instead of just yapping my mouth, is showing you all the different ways you can use, or I use in sessions, to make things loud. And I'm going to give you, so I got hard clipping, soft clipping, multiband parallel, saturator, and then 3 different limiting modes. I'm going to explain to you how I set them up, what I am listening for, and why and when I would use one over the other. You can't use them all together. It'd sound like hot soup. But let's take a listen. So the first one's hard clipping. How do we set up hard clipping? Drag the track into iZotope Audio Editor. People have always asked this on my videos. How do I get the markers up? You get the T-clip function, okay? And then you get these little markers up there. You can just basically zoom it up and down and up and down. And for this, I think we ended up on -5. So we'll do that. And I always show people this because they're like, oh, you can't clip that much. And it's like, yeah, you can, because there's 48,000 samples a second. And I'm getting a bit cranky here because it's past my bedtime, but there's about 12 samples there that get clipped. You're not going to hear the harmonics of 12 samples in a 48,000 sample second. You're just not. So the first thing is, get into Audio Editor, find the peaks you want to clip off, and it's going to buy you headroom. And we've got a true peak level here of 1 decibel. I've set the clipper up here, so it's clipping at -5, okay? And also turn the oversampling off when you're doing this, because you are not going to hear the harmonics above Nyquist when you're clipping 12 samples at 4 decibels in any single instance. So it's just unnecessary, and it adds also filters for upsampling and downsampling, which just you don't need to have processing your audio. So let's start this bad boy and get playing before and after. After and before? No, we're going to go before and after. Just like that, I bought 4 decibels of headroom with no audible degradation of the mix. So that's a positive. So hard clipping for peaks, for very sharp peaks. Soft clipping, now, I've done deep dives on soft clipping and the transfer curves and the arctangent function, the polynomials and all that, but we're going to be using our ears and what I'm listening for here. Basically, soft clipping is a transfer function into the ceiling, and it manipulates the sample values. and as it manipulates them, typically the softer information, those sample values are augmented more and more as they get closer to the ceiling. What this does, and what I'm listening for here, is the space between the transients. I'm listening to the harmonics it brings, as a soft clipper does, to the information as it approaches the ceiling. So when there's a kick, when there's a snare, the guitar's in between it, I'm listening to the tonal changes in that and the intensity it brings. It's very subtle, and there are a few caveats to using soft clipping because it can change things that you might not want to. So let's listen before and after. So what I'm listening to here is the space in between the notes. The only thing is, and I'm going to clue into a little short loop here, is as it introduces these harmonics, as it saturates the sound, it tilts slightly the overall tone of the mix because it's introducing harmonics above the fundamental. And you've got to be careful with this because if you've got a warm mix and you start using lots of soft clipping, it can brighten it up very quickly. So take a listen to this quick loop before and after. Just the nose of the guitar gets a little bit more edgy through that process. And if that's something you're not going for, you want to avoid this. If it's something you want to bring to the track, that character, it's a good thing to embrace. The third one is when you want to avoid that sort of edge soft clipping has. Multiband parallel compression in Leapwing Dyne 1. Bobcats has this tonalization preset here, which I love using. Whoops. Probably shouldn't have done that, but that's all good because I can just set this back up. And basically what it does is it compresses all the signal and then blends it back in, and it does it in a really transparent way. So you're getting that fill in between the kicks and the snares, but it's sort of focusing on lengthening out the sustain of the tone. So not the nose, not the edge, not the attack, not the initial aspect of it, because it's compressing really hard and lifting up. You're getting a lot more of the sustain and the body of the elements. So take a listen to this before and after, because this is a pretty interesting one. It's another way you can use to make things louder. Perfect. So that's the second way. That's a third way. The fourth way is to use a saturator. Now for me, the Michelangelo EQ is hands down a really good tool in my opinion. This particular preset is thick as F. And it just basically does what the soft clipper does, but with a more guided tone, because you can, this typically in this setting adds quite a bit of harmonics to the low end, which I like to beef it up. And what you're aiming for here is to saturate and create aggression in the region of the track that you want to create the most intensity for that loudness. So take a listen to this Michelangelo EQ, or saturator I'd almost denote it as, and we'll go from there. And you can really hear this big time on the kick drum. So let's just get that to the kick drum. Beautiful. And now the final way to get shit loud is to use limiters. But with limiters, you start taking steps backwards the more you limit, because they're like right up at the ceiling and they're going to be pushing shit down, and they're all going to do it in a different way. So what I got is my 3 modes I probably use the most at the moment. There's a few other little sneaky ones I can't show you right now because they're not released, these plugins, so I can't show you them. But these are the main ones I use. I use Pro L2 in all-round mode, which I've been using more recently, modern mode in Ozone, and balance mode in Ozone. All-round is really good. It's very low distortion and great for controlling the tail of transients. Modern is really good for tightening up the low end, and balance is really good for having an open low end, but it has more distortion as a result if you start driving it. So what we're going to do is, I'm going to turn these all into Delta mode, because I want you guys to listen to the different signal first as we flick through them. And then we're going to just listen to them one by one on a quick loop so we can really dial into what's going on here. Here, how all-round mode took less low end than modern mode, because modern mode, like I said, it tightens the low end as it limits. That's the compromise of having less distortion, is that it's controlling that low end as it clamps down. Balance mode, you keep more low end, but at the expense of having more distortion when you're pushing it more. Now what we'll do is we'll actually listen to that kick on loop as they're getting limited so we can hear what's going on. And basically that's how I use those three limiting modes and consider the tonal implications it has when I'm driving something loud. Now, I just went through the technical side of mastering rules I broke, but there are a whole bunch of business rules I broke too that helped me build a successful career in audio. And if you want to check them out, click up here. It's going to be up on the screen, and check and watch that video, because that's really good advice for people trying to make a career. Or click below to join my 5-day mastering sprint and level up your mastering game. Until next time, take care.